it's my pleasure to say welcome to Archway Gallery. I am saying this on behalf of our director, Joel Anderson. He's not with us today, but I just have a couple of announcements before our artist talk. We are going to have our Palette to Palette event. This is a dinner with 5 courses. Our friend Chef Soren. This is a wonderful event. I have been in this event as a guest 3 times, so you better come because it's just wonderful. It's on May 19, and you can see all the details in our webpage, archwaygallery.com. And well, this is really my pleasure to introduce you to Larry Garmezy. I don't know if you know that he is a geologist.
I think half of this room knows it.
Well, as a geologist, it's very interesting that he became an artist and a fine photographer, because in a scientific way, he was trained just as a visual artist to see pattern and color. That is very important for his survival as a geologist. And artists do that. So he has a very precise training, and we are so happy to see how he's developing not only his skills of looking at color and pattern, but now the surprise this year is his narrative. So things are getting deeper and deeper. These are deep waters because he's speaking about one of his passions, people. So bringing these 3 things together for us as artists and friends, it's just wonderful to see his development. With further notice, here is our friend Larry Garmezy.
So it does appear as though this is the 3rd session of the Dunleavy Geological Society. I was wondering whether it would be, and it definitely is. So, about this show, 44 years ago, I went to field camp. So I am an old fart. And that started my falling in love with the area of the Northern Rockies. And then, has anyone looked on this pedestal here? There's a silver frame with 2 photos in it. If you at some point take a look at that, because that's 40 years ago this June, when I was back out there starting my master's work in Idaho. And I had this tent, this basically World War II tent that Penn State had, a big canvas tent. I pitched it, and within a week, it had totally ripped in half. I came back one afternoon, it was still standing, but in 2 pieces, flapping in the really heavy wind funneling up this canyon. And so I started staying in a shack that was in the mountains, that was from before when the roads were really put in, and people, in the summers, the ranch, they would have their herds up higher up in the mountains, and they'd have these little shacks. And I stayed in that for a while with a lot of rats that probably had bubonic plague, but I survived it. And then after a week, I went around to the other side of the range to start mapping. And I looked on the topo map, as all the geologists know. You can see things like ranches, they show up on the map. So there was one, I drove up to it to ask whether they had a shack like that in the mountains that I could get bubonic plague in. And I ran into a family called the Wilsons. And I asked them about the cabin, and what they said to me is, no, we don't have anything like that, but you can stay with us. And I offered to give them some rent money, because I had a stipend that I could give them some money. And the father of this family looked at me and said, no, the only thing we ask is that you stay in touch. The Wilsons became mom to and dad to. So I had a second family, a second set of brothers and sisters. Spent 2 summers with them, living with them. And then over the next 4 or 5 years, I was working just a little to the north, so I kept coming back. And have been in touch with them ever since. I've got baby photos of our twins with my parents, with Lisa's parents, and with mom and dad too. So they've been a real part of our life. And what I learned from them is, it's funny doing geology how well you get to know people. And the Wilsons were one of these families that everyone in the county, and the county in Montana to the north, Clark County and Beaverhead County, everyone knew the Wilsons because they had all the heavy machinery. And so if anyone needed anything done, they got in touch with the Wilsons. So I knew 2 counties worth of people. And you know, if I see a 5C license plate, I'm going to stop them because I'm going to know people they know. And you also learn about the history of it. So Mom too, in the late 40s, she went to this school on horseback. It's 45 miles on a 2 dirt track road, not even a gravel road, a dirt track road to get here. In the winter, they would take sleigh rides. It would take all day to get to the boom town of Du Bois, Idaho, which is largely almost a ghost town now. So they were just way out there. And so you learn about that history. These people are incredibly strong people, and they came in 2 flavors. There were the rancher flavor, which Mom too's parents were of, and Dad too was from the other side, the mining side. Because this was just north of here in 1862 was the Biennial gold strike of Montana. So 2 types of people came out here. Most of the miners became ranchers. The ranchers stayed as ranchers. But you get to know the whole history of these people in the place, like like the people who built this cabin in 1898. Lived in it until a horse kicked him in the head, and actually lived in it a while longer after that. Just amazing stories, and so that's what I wanted to capture. It's a beautiful area. It is big sky country. You've got these big, broad vistas. And the amazing thing is how empty they are, except for the occasional cabin. And they're high intermontane valleys, no termites. And so these buildings that I drove past 40 years ago in my Willys, never having time to stop or think about taking photos because I had to save my precious slide film for geology photos in the mountains, they're still there. So over the last 4 years, I've been going back and trying to find these places, and they're all still there. Almost all of them are still there. One of the ones underneath the title over there, there's 1 building missing from there, the ice house, but the other 3 are still there. And it was really fun getting back and talking to the ranchers again. Ross Hansen, it was his great-grandfather that moved out to here. And I remember, this family from when I was a kid. The other thing the Wilsons did for me, I had so much fun out there, I would always be late getting back to Penn State. There was no reason to start when classes started. I was having too much fun. So they had me participate in cattle roundups for the Sullivan family, another ranch family down the road. By keeping me late in the year, I would get to Penn State late every year, which meant I had to jump through all sorts of hoops to register for classes and health care and all of that stuff. And working in the grad student office was a young psychology grad student named Lisa. And so if it wasn't for the Wilsons, apparently I wouldn't have met Lisa. So the story runs deep. And now I promise you, if you have any questions, hold them for a moment, because I want to ask something of this crowd. I was hoping Mom too would make it here tonight. I had planned on flying her out with one of my sisters, Dina, but I got a call a few weeks ago, and I was always sort of worried about whether her health would allow her to travel. And Dina told me, no, it's not a good idea. So Mom too, it would have been great if she was here. I've got great stories on the Wilsons. I'll be happy to talk to you guys about any of these images and about this family, an incredible family. But she would have some amazingly embarrassing stories about me. But she's not here. But in 2 weeks, it's her birthday. So what I would love for this crowd to do on the count of 3 is to say, "Happy birthday, Mom, too," as loud as you can, because she'll be seeing this video, okay? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Mom, too! have any questions about any of this? Letha?
Yeah, tell us about your printer.
I've got, the market crash in 2008 was a very good thing for my art career. So Lisa, the year before, had bought me Photoshop, and I started printing things and paying, professional printers to print them. The Epson 24-inch printer that lots of photographers like to use cost $3,600. Then there was the price. Went down and down and down because of the market collapse, and finally the price had gone way down and they offered a $900 rebate. So I got the thing for $1,900 and it's been working like a charm ever since. Yeah.
I like that you included the little bit of commentary on them because it makes it more meaningful. I noticed that some of the paintings or the photographs, like Deadfall, they look like watercolors. Does that go back to that printer?
No, that goes back. So this is actually my first show where I've kept the photographs largely as straight photographs. Normally I play around with them. And for people who've seen my previous shows, I'm in love with a couple of things in Photoshop. There are a couple of filters and then a thing called the smudge brush. And it gives it that, and I smudge the entire image, and that's done by hand, digitally by hand, but you're smudging every inch of the image to create that sort of watercolor effect. And so there are none of these three. The images with the trees and the deadfall back there, and the one of Harriman Ranch on the back left it's done a lot on those. But the printer is happy to do totally tight resolution. I just don't normally use it that way. Yes?
What happened to the Willys Jeep?
The Willys Jeep was a Penn State Jeep, a 1949 Willys. It could go 35 miles an hour anywhere, but it couldn't go over 35 miles anywhere. It was a great vehicle. I had it for the first field season. Then another grad student got it after that, and so actually Grandpa too, so the father of Chuck Wilson, went with me to Idaho Falls, and I bought a 1957 Chevy pickup for $250 that I would drive into the field with 6 spare tires already on their rims, sitting in the back, and jugs of water because the radiator would constantly need it. But it worked for another couple of years.
In the intervening years between the time you were there first and this last time, what kind of changes did you notice in the landscape or the people here?
The landscape, almost none. The towns are largely going away. So people in this area of Idaho are moving to Idaho Falls or some of the communities just outside of Idaho Falls. In Montana, they're moving into Dillon. And so the small towns are dying. So the town of Du Bois, county seat for Clark County, Idaho, it has a county courthouse. It used to have 2 car dealerships, a couple of hotels, none of that. And so the last thing that will be remaining in Du Bois will be like a couple of these images. There will be the grain elevators at some point will be left.
Would you think about maybe continuing on this level, finding some place where you could find more images like this? Maybe
Oh, I love this area. There are lots of images that didn't make this show, and a lot of valleys I still have to get back into. And I'll be taking the spring photos and on cloudy days. So this show started because to take photos of natural springs, you need really good light, sunlight. So on cloudy days, I would go out trying to find these old homesteads that I passed 40 years ago. And I'll continue doing that. Yeah?
Hi Larry, thank you so much for the show. This is actually, I think, the 4th one we've seen of yours. And actually, 2.5 years ago, I bought Acadian fog for Colin for his birthday. So it's beautiful.
Thank you.
But I'm wondering, each show has been very different. I'm wondering what you can say about what drives your creative process, because each one has used a different technique or a different focus. I'm always curious, especially as a geologist.
So each one has been something that's near and dear to my heart. So the first show was called orogenesis, which all the geologists knew what it meant and went, oh, that's boring, and all the artists thought it had something to do with erogenous, and so they got excited. So that was the first. The second one, ever since I was a kid, I would hunt springs. I called it spring hunting. I'd go up creeks. I wanted to see where they started. And so the second show was near dear to my heart because it was water. This show was, I was getting back to the roots in Wilson's. I was going to do a show, and it was going to be a political show called Losing Equilibrium. I dropped that one November of a year and a half ago and said, I'll go back and do this instead.
What's next?
I've got a couple of ideas. We'll see. I love springtime and spring greens, so that could happen, but we'll see. I think it's time for people to food and drink, and I'm sure you already have done it, but if not, there are 31 phenomenal artists in this gallery, and they start behind this wall going that way, so don't miss it.